In the 1872 novel Carmilla, the narrator describes her dreams of a vampire. Sometimes there came a sensation as if a hand was drawn softly along my cheek and neck. Sometimes it was as if warm lips kissed me, and longer and more lovingly as they reached my throat. But there the caress fixed itself. My heart beat faster, my breathing rose and fell rapidly and full drawn. A sobbing that rose into a sense of strangulation supervened and turned into a dreadful convulsion in which many of my senses left me, and I became unconscious. Raw is about a freshman in college who becomes a cannibal. It is, unsurprisingly, one of the grossest movies I have ever seen. Close your eyes now, faint of heart. There are graphic shots of mutilated flesh, horse tongues, and perhaps worst of all, the protagonist vomiting up her own hair. You can open your eyes. But surprisingly, it is also one of the most sexual movies I have ever seen. Everyone is attractive, there is a lot of sex and even more time spent naked or in underwear, and the protagonist even makes out with the camera. The film follows two awakenings in its protagonist, sexual and cannibalistic. And while it might seem strange to group these two things together, consider again the vampire. For the past 200 years or so, the archetypal vampire has been sexy. Evil, sure, but also tall, handsome, well-spoken, and romantic. This was kicked off by John Polidori's short story in 1816, The Vampire, and it got arguably its most famous treatment more recently with the young adult series Twilight. This isn't to say that flesh-eating is a turn-on for people, but it is to say that societally it isn't necessarily a turn-off. If it were, everyone would be Team Jacob. The fundamental difference between something like Twilight and something like Raw is that Raw does not romanticize cannibalism the way Twilight does vampirism. When a sexy vampire bites someone, it's creepy perhaps, but not exactly gross. Sure, there might be a trickle of blood running down the victim's arm, but nothing that's going to make anyone gag. But in Raw, there is the tearing of flesh, the shredded skin, and the red, open tissue beneath the wound. It is the furthest thing from sexy. Whereas in most romantic vampire stories, the vampirism is a part of the sexiness, in Raw, the cannibalism and the sex are kept mostly separate. But you would be wrong to assume that this was done out of kindness for the viewer, because it creates one of the most uncomfortable viewing experiences in modern film. The experience of Raw can be defined by two feelings, disgust and arousal. God, arousal is a really creepy word. I'm gonna say sexy time. I hope that's not more creepy. I'm going for like a funny, playful thing here. I apologize if it's more creepy to say sexy time. No matter what Inside Out would have you believe, disgust is not an emotion, and neither is sexy time. Whereas emotions like happiness and sadness are felt in the mind, disgust and sexy time are felt in the body. The reason this is important is because emotions can be gotten over very quickly. Let's say you're sad about something, that girl you like rejected you. But if she changes her mind, your sadness will go away instantaneously, no matter how intense it was. The same cannot be said of disgust. You can't watch The Human Centipede, look away for a few seconds, and then go eat a meatball sub. What this means for Raw is that when you've got two scenes back to back, one sexy and one gross, your brain doesn't have time to recover from one before you're plunged into the other. Consider this line from The Office. I show her an image of something that turns her on.
And then she looks at me, then she looks at the image, then back at me, then back at the image. Soon she doesn't know what is me, what is the image. She just knows that she's turned on.
Raw takes this concept and applies it in both directions. It'll show you a scene of two people having sex, and then cut to blood and guts. You're immediately disgusted by the gore, but your brain hasn't yet recovered from being, if you will, in the mood for love. The same is true in the opposite direction. Your brain will start responding to the sexuality of a scene, but you still want to vomit from what you just saw. The brilliance of Raw is that it makes you feel both of these things at once, and while this is far from a pleasant experience, it puts you in the mind of the protagonist very effectively. She is having two simultaneous awakenings, one sexual and one cannibalistic, so the film forces you to have two simultaneous emotions, respectively, causing in you the same discomfort that she would be feeling. And, equally importantly, it drives at what I think to be the thesis of the film. In any film that seems to be comparing two things, it might seem natural to ask which it is likening to the other. Is Raw saying that sex is like cannibalism, or that cannibalism is like sex? Julia Ducournau has talked at length about the film, but has been careful to not share her interpretation of its meaning, lest she prevent us from coming up with our own. There's no right answer to this, but the one that I'm most receptive to is that Raw is not really about either sex or cannibalism. It's about desire. Without giving too much away, there is one character at the end of the film who is able to control her desires, and another who is not. Raw is a film about people wanting to do things, and about how weak our moral compasses can be when the conflict between our desires and our conscience is stark enough. For all the sex in Raw, there is almost no romance. In this sense, Raw likens us to animals, creatures of instinct. We do the things we do for no other reason than that we want to do them. Someone does not do the right thing because it is right, but because that is the thing that they wanted to do, and it happens to be right. Julia Ducournau herself said it best.
Is
The
that
reason
the
she
reason
eats
why
him
she
is
eats
because she
him
can.
is because she can
Because
and because
she
she's
is
hungry.